that was Sunday. And Tuesday, one of the planes that crashed into the tower, Barbara Olson was on it because she was going to that, morning show, I think, to have her interview. She was going to her
How
book
convenient. How very convenient.
Yeah.
That's so strange. How is that? I mean, I know.
You know what's even more convenient? That Ted Olson marries a woman that looks just like Barbara Olson. About 6-7 years later, with maybe a little bit of work, her phone call hadn't went through, or I'm sorry, it had went through, and she had said it's the person in seat 12B or whatever. She had to actually call back and say, no, not 12B, 12C or whatever. That means you have to believe that not one call at 25-30,000 feet went through, but 2 calls. There's so much you have to believe with the Barbara Olson story. Yeah, a lot of people think she was a handler. I have no actual evidence or proof of that, just circumstantial, as you hear right now.
What did you say they thought that she was?
Oh, like a handler? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if you're talking to me.
Yeah. Yeah, what did you say she was? What they say she was?
They believe she would have been like a CIA handler type. Somebody, especially a woman, you're going to need a couple women. They had 2 people call from each plane, and it was indeed from the phones. Those planes needed to be on the ground for those phones to make contact.
Yeah, that never added up to me. I remember hearing about that back when it happened, and you couldn't call when the planes were in the air, but they said phone calls.
Well, you have your phone.
Go ahead.
And they don't work anyway. They don't work.
Right, they work horrible. Maybe long enough to say, "I'll be at gate 6G." Hello, I don't know if you can hear me. I can hear you. Can't hear. But if you can hear me, I'll be at the gate in 10 minutes. That was it. That's why they ripped him out. They took him out in 2003 or whatever and put in a new system. But yeah. There is a woman named Rebecca Roth who was a flight attendant. And she actually, I think, in my opinion, in my research I've done, did the best job of answering one of the hardest questions of 9/11, which is, where did the actual planes with the people on them go? Since those most likely, like really most likely, like were not the planes that hit what we're supposed to have seen hit. And this is what she did. And I think it's as brilliant as it is simple. She said, all right, well, those phones had to be on the ground to make those, to start making those calls at I think it was like 9:34 or something like that. Those calls started. 2 from each plane. Okay, so she's thinking to herself, they would have needed a hangar, or several hangars, big enough to hide the 4 planes. They would have needed to be able to get there in time. So they got 2 that left from Boston Logan. You got 1 that left from Newark International, not far from me at all, here in Jersey. Then you got 1 that left from DC, from Dulles International. For planes go really fast. That's relatively the same area. So she looked for a place with a 10,000-foot runway, because that's another thing you would need, at least like a 10,000-foot runway to stop a big old 757, 767, either or. And wouldn't you know, she found a place where all jets, I mean, the moment they went up, they wouldn't have even reached 30,000 feet probably, because they would have been up for 15, 20 minutes. And if the Boeing uninterruptible autopilots, which has patents, you can Google it and you'll find it comes up as the Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot. It's a very real thing. If they hijacked them electronically, the pilots would have been like, what the hell? We just go up, guns working, is your shit working? Is your stuff working? Because my stuff isn't working. And so they would have landed. Everybody would have, what the heck? And she found a place called Westover Air Force Base in a place called Chicopee, Massachusetts. And it just matched it perfectly. There would have been enough time. They would have all been there just about 9:34 to go into, and the one woman said they went upstairs. Betty Ong, the one flight attendant, she had used, and she didn't say they, she said he, as in one. Somebody sprayed mace and they can't breathe in business section. this is what she said. Let me tell you what the expert said. Cheap perfume from Hawaii, bottles of rum from wherever. If something breaks in that thing, it doesn't matter if it's what place it's in. If it's in business class or in the very rear behind the galley curtain, or if somebody has really bad gas, or the entire freaking plane just stinks. And it sounded way more like a read script than anything. So her theory is that handlers said something to the nature of, listen, we're so ridiculously sorry. You don't understand. After today, things are going to be, this is a crazy drill you're going to be a part of. You're going to be compensated in cash and years worth of air. They would have told them whatever. And they would have been thinking they were going to be heroes. So they would have possibly taken 2 people off each jet. Where do they have stairs? They didn't fly any 747s that day. That's the only aircraft with stairs is a 747. But what has stairs is a hangar. Often there's stairs in all 4 corners that go up to a mezzanine type level where there's other offices and such. Mm-hmm. And her theory, and I happen to think this is reasonable, is they took 2 people off each jet, gave them a script or something like that to read, telling them that, they would be heroes. They were going to be part of the biggest drill ever toward terrorism, kind of like mixing the truth with falseness, just like you do to sell a fake reality. And then after they had called their loved ones to leave messages and so on, like they were told to do, who knows where they went, how, if they were probably off, who knows how that would have happened. I'm glad I got about 8 or 9 minutes to talk about that, because that's a question a lot of people ask. Where in the world did the people go on the actual planes? And nobody really knows, but that's the closest answer.
It all blew up, so there's very little.
But that's the
whole bodies, right? But
I mean, they tell us they all blew up, but
yeah, but
that could just be a big front.
A couple people are alive from that plane that or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. Who knows?
Barbara Alston could have been one of the handlers, and I mean, she could have been. She could not have been, maybe, but
I thought that was
very
so.
strange.
I said that, and then 2 days later, well, she didn't get to the first interview to promote her book, so that was so odd. And there's other people too that.
She probably didn't want to be questioned at that, booked whatever event, book promoting event.
They Clintonized her.
The possibility.
My personal thoughts are she's still alive, but you never know. Yeah, I mean, you have a good point there too. It wouldn't be the first person by plane. How about Senator Kennedy? In 2000, which imagine she ends up being senator. Who was senator during 9/11? Of New York, one of the senators anyway. Hillary Rodham Clinton.
There's so
she was
about it.
I remember that well.
There and coincidences are one thing, but that's kind of quirky. Some of the stuff is.
This is what I believe in coincidences. I run into my neighbor down at the grocery store. But I'm in Florida at Publix, and I run into my neighbor at the grocery store in the middle of the summer. No.
Yeah.
And you talking about cell phones back then as compared to now. Even now, they don't work very well on a plane. That.
Right.
And like they have this, like last night there was some calls I listened to that were like long calls, like I could. In the building, maybe, the Twin Towers, but this was on the plane that this guy called and said he loved his wife and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, how did he get all that?
That didn't, those were on the ground, like he was saying. Those calls that were from the ground, because back then they couldn't do them in the air that good.
Yeah,
right. And the FBI took those. If you remember, back then you had to get a special expensive phone to have caller ID on it. Otherwise, you had that little white box, if you remember. And the FBI took all the little white boxes just to they removed all of them. So apparently they were really honestly made from them phones. Some people think they were voice morphed and such.
No, but I remember what you're talking about with the phones, because I remember when it happened, I was at work and I had a little flip phone, and my husband was always watching the news. So he had texted me, I think. No, he called me, but he called me on the office phone and said something's going on. And so but we weren't texting and doing all that stuff like we do now. It just wasn't. And then we didn't even have a television to watch it on, but our custodials had a lounge and they had a little one. So we went downstairs and saw what was going on. But it wasn't like it is today, it's just totally different. You don't have all this stuff right at your fingertips or iPads or anything. So
those calls, the way they said they happened, they didn't happen the way they said, the way the mainstream media told us. Not at all.
About that. This morning he was like, we didn't have our phones and stuff weren't doing that then, because he said we had to find a phone too. He worked on the campus I worked at, but it was a different office. He said we have one television, I think it was in a lounge too. And he said we all had to run down there and see what was going on. So, and I remember when the Challenger blew up, that we didn't know what happened until we went home, or like we found a television somewhere. Everybody was saying they still were alive. And I think I ran home at lunch that day. It was in 86 then, but I ran home at lunch and watched it on TV, and I was like, well, they're not alive. But yeah. So
I was in 5th grade in school.
What?
I was just saying I was in 5th grade in school when that happened, and it was a huge deal.
I know.
In school, yeah.
What grade?
It's not every day a space shuttle blows up like that.
No, but when the terrorist attacks happened, though, Austin, what grade were you in? You were in 5th grade, weren't you? Or
I was a freshman in high school.
Oh yeah, so you were a little older. Okay.
Yeah, I was a little older, but
wow. But yeah, so these cell phones that work great, I'm like, they don't do that nowadays. How do they expect us to believe some of this stuff?
Well, check this out. There was a Japanese TV station. I don't know why they did this in Canada, but for some reason in Canada, they rented a small Cessna, and they used phone company A, phone company B, and C, 3 different companies, and they said, let's test it ourselves. So they flew up to, first they did it between 0 and 1,000 feet, and for there, I think they had something like a 33%, maybe 35%, it going through rate. Then they went to 2,000 feet, less. They went to 3,000 feet. It was like maybe 10%. By the time they got to even halfway to 10,000 feet, none of the A, B, or C was working. And they did this multiple times. And this is a long time ago. It should still be on YouTube. But this was, I think, 2003